Greetings, adventurers! You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Good morning. This is episode 2 of The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood. I'm obviously your host, Professor Jonathan Peter Atwood, and this will be a night on a train. Now, I said good morning because it is actually morning when I'm recording this because it was a very, very long journey. I actually traveled on the Orient Express to go to a science conference. And it took a fair amount of time. I mean, people don't normally travel by train anymore, but I got to tell you, it's quite an experience. It really is. The Orient Express is like nothing I've ever experienced before. Now, I know what you're saying. You're like, well, wait a minute. Didn't it end in 2009? Kinda, it did to the public. It still runs for scientists and explorers, and you just gotta kind of know where to get tickets. I mean, that's all I can really say. But it left Strasbourg on its final overnight run in 2009 to Vienna, and on December 13, the name Orient Express disappeared from the official European timetables after 126 years. That's quite a run, absolutely. But there's a lot of misinterpretations of the Orient Express, or a lot of misinformation, and I think about trains in general, which I find interesting. It's like, how could you get so many things wrong about trains? But turns out you can. A lot of people don't really know as much about trains as they should. It's people look at it as this archaic form of transportation, like the stagecoach, and I assure you it is not. It is an alternative mode of transportation, but it has a class and a style all its own, especially the Orient Express. It takes it really to another level. But again, it's a private experience. You just have to know where to get tickets. I can't really tell you more than that. Paris by the Louvre. There's an alley behind there. There's okay. You know what? I've said too much. But in case you do want to ride it again, that's maybe you could actually find the ticket booth. But one of the things that people don't know about the Orient Express is Agatha. The most famous is, of course, the author Agatha Christie's Murdered on the Orient Express. It isn't actually set on the Orient Express. It's set on the Simplon Orient Express. By the 1920s and 30s, there was a whole interconnecting network of Wagonlitz company trains with Orient Express as part of their name, in addition to the Orient Express itself. So the Orient Express has always run from Paris via Munich, Vienna, Budapest, where the Simplon Orient Express started running in April 1919, taking a southerly route. Anyway, it's a lot of trivia that you could kind of look up if you really want to. But here's the thing: it had this just kind of mystique and this mystery and this just almost this magic that it kind of had. Just the journey of this train, and it was absolutely an amazing experience. I can't stress it enough. To actually be on the Orient Express, even if it wasn't the one that Agatha Christie wrote about, in that time, many years ago, in the early 1900s, I think that could have been something really, really spectacular to see. Maybe, depending on what I've got cooking in the lab, maybe we could go back to that actual time and see it for ourselves. But we'll see. We won't get ahead of ourselves. But the thing about it is it was one of those type of visits and trains that the journey was almost the destination in itself. Once you got on the train, you felt like that was like the main part of the experience. It wasn't just to get you from point A to point B. When you go from Strasbourg to say Vienna, and that's kind of where I went. Just so you know, the science conference is always in Vienna. I'm not really sure why, but they never want to seem to move it. It's always in Vienna, and sometimes it's, they do move it from month to month. Sometimes it'll be in the summer, sometimes in the winter, and I got to tell you, Vienna in the winter. It's cold. It's got, I know we get spoiled here in Los Angeles with the weather, but, winter in Vienna is not, some people are probably like, well, that's not like Canada cold. I mean, Vienna winters are mild. It doesn't matter. It's degrees. To say how fast does light act like a wave or a particle, depending on how fast it's hitting at a surface, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Cold is cold. If I'm cold, I'm cold. I need a blanket. And it doesn't matter to me geographically where your criticism may come from because of, if you were born in Alaska or something. It doesn't matter. Scientifically, it doesn't matter either. It's more opinion. And, if I hooked myself up to a coldometer and connected a Canadian and someone from Hawaii to that same coldometer, I'm sure different temperatures, we would react differently to them. And no one would be wrong. I mean, that's my point here. No one would be wrong. So anyway, the Orient Express was quite an experience. And I have to say, just imagine it was like in the heyday, like in the 1930s, you were in Istanbul, Turkish-Bulgarian border, just in time to have breakfast. Okay, so what I wanted to do is talk to you more about, like, like I said, it gets a little confusing. It's like, well, where, if we're talking about the Simplon Orient Express, is that where or is it Paris? Is it Istanbul? Where does it go? Basically, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm just telling you, I got on the Orient Express and I had to travel to Vienna for a science conference. That's really all that kind of matters to the story. You could kind of look up the rest on your own. And but before I actually talk about what it was like to be actually on the Orient Express, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the trains themselves. People don't really know enough about railway history, and I think it applies to many different things. It doesn't sound like it would, but it really does. I mean, there was the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. It was a 31-mile railroad linking Liverpool and Manchester, and it was in September in 1830. It was capable of going 30 miles an hour, and they could carry about 500,000 passengers in the first year. It was incredible. There was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and it was one of those trains that was just kind of created to kind of compete with other trains, and it was semi-successful. President Andrew Jackson became the first commander-in-chief to ride the rails when he boarded a B&O train, like from Monopoly, running from Ellicott's Mills to Baltimore in 1833. So there was the Panama Railway, and that linked the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans for the first time when the Panama Railway was completed in 1855. And the 50-mile railroad eased the arduous journey across the Panamanian Isthmus for passengers who traveled by sea between the east and west coast of the United States. And it became popular with tens of thousands of prospectors seeking riches from the California gold rush. There's also the Lincoln Funeral Train, which is, I don't know if anyone would have ridden that. That's, even in 1865, that's kind of a marketing nightmare. Going to be on the Lincoln Funeral Train. I have to get to Sandusky, Ohio, and that's the only one that leaves at the time that's convenient for me. I still don't know if I would ride it. It just feels like it wouldn't work. But it would left from D.C. on April 21st, 1865, and it bore the coffin of Abraham Lincoln, obviously, after spending nearly 2 weeks winding its way through 180 cities. So it was one of those things where, after Lincoln's Body Road, I don't know if I would ride it after. It's just the kind of thing where I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, scientifically or as an explorer. I'm like, okay, well, that's, let's put President Lincoln to rest. I don't need to ride the rails that his body just rode. So let's see. They also have the Metropolitan Underground Railway, which is really interesting. They began to operate, I mean, these are kind of the predecessors of basically subways, between the streets of London on January 10th, 1863. The London Underground proved the effectiveness of mass transit and eased the horse-drawn traffic congestion that was clogging the streets of the British capital. That's a lesson that a lot of cities learned after that. So, people don't really always make that connection that the old steam locomotives of the Old West, they were basically the precursors of subways in New York and everything else. Anything on a track has its origin somewhere in a steam locomotive somewhere. And of course, the Transcontinental Railroad, that was in 1869, and it truly became the United States. And it was pretty much from Omaha, Nebraska. It was over the course of 7 years, with the Central Pacific Railroad building east from Sacramento, California, and the Union Pacific Railroad building west from Omaha, Nebraska. And it slashed the travel time of the 3,000-mile cross-country journey from months to less than a week. And it obviously contributed to the rapid westward expansion of the United States. And then the Trans-Siberian Railway is, not quite as exciting and filled with intrigue as the Orient Express, but still kind of interesting. It's 8 time zones and 6,000 miles across treacherous subarctic terrain. It was the longest and most expensive railway ever built when it was completed in 1916. And of course, we've got the bullet trains. Those are obviously a little more interesting. So we have the completion of high-speed rail lines between Tokyo and Osaka that sliced in half the travel time between the two cities. Opened just before the 1964 Summer Olympics, speeds of up to 125 miles per hour. And of course, the Eurostar was the tunnel that was under the English Channel. Anyway, those were the some of the most influential trains and routes that we've pretty much had in our history of the world and of the history of trains. So, like I said, it's the Orient Express ended its run in 2009, but I actually, let me put it this way. Even though it's invite only, the Orient Express, it's not free. So I had to save up for a couple of months, and, I sold a promising experiment to another scientist. But I really wanted to do it. I wanted to put the money aside for this, the famous Orient Express. And I got to tell you, I was not disappointed. It was worth every single penny. So let's get into it. When I first got to the station, it's one of those things like, I know you're thinking of like, well, is it like Hogwarts where it's like it's in the middle of the station where you can't quite get to it? No, it's actually, right in the actual train station. But, when I got there, I mentioned Paris. That's where I picked it up. Historically, like I said, there's different places you could actually get it. But I did fly to Paris and I got the train there. And then I rode it to Vienna. So getting on the train in Paris, it's absolutely beautiful. I did stop by the Louvre, which is fantastic, but I didn't have a lot of time, so I could only spend about 45 minutes there. I know there's a lot more to see, so I'm sure I'll be able to get back there at some point. Stopped at a beautiful cafe along the way to the Eiffel Tower, and it is a cliche, but the French really do have the best food. It's absolutely fantastic. Everything from the baguettes to the coffee. It's weird the way food can kind of just bring you into another place. It's we talk about exploring, we talk about discoveries, scientific discoveries, and exploration, but food is another way you can actually get there. The chocolate croissant that I had, I know it's not the healthiest thing, but I'm just trying to picture it. It was so buttery and so flaky, and it just broke apart. And then I just broke it in half, and then the chocolate was just like almost like inviting. It's a weird thing to say, chocolate was inviting, but it really was. It was just saying, look, I was made here for you to eat before you got onto your secret train to your science conference in Vienna. And I really felt that way. And the air was crisp and clear. There was just the smell of fresh coffee grounds in the air. And it was just a slow, quiet pace. I really, it's a lot to do, science and exploring. And sometimes you just got to slow it down a little bit. So I enjoyed that chocolate croissant. I enjoyed my coffee. You know, a lot of people get fancy blends and stuff. I always go house, because I figure who knows how to make a better cup of coffee than the actual place. So I don't really mess around. I say, oh, house blend, doesn't matter what it is. That's what I get every single time, because scientifically and also from a probability standpoint, that's always going to be your best cup of coffee, because they've ran the numbers themselves. It's just math. They know what people are going to like the most based on exit surveys and, the expressions of people as they drink the coffee that they secretly record over in the kitchen. So when you order a house blend, know that, years of research have probably gone into that, just to make sure, you get the best possible house blend that you can. So I got to the station in Paris, and it was one of those interesting, bustling stations. Everybody had somewhere to go, obviously, because it's a train station, but it had a different feel to it. It felt like everyone was in their own world, and all the worlds were kind of colliding together. And everyone felt like they had this great sense of purpose. Like in our lives, again, some of the philosophy actually comes in. We don't always have that great sense of purpose, but when you're in a train station, you do have it, because you're on your way somewhere, you're on your way from somewhere. When you're in a train station, it feels like at that very moment in time, that's where you're supposed to be. And that's what I felt like. That's where I felt like I was supposed to be. Now, I did dress up. A lot of times I don't dress up for a train ride. This time I did. And I really wanted to enjoy the experience. And I think, in hindsight, was it a mistake? No, I don't think it was. I think the dressing up for the Orient Express was truly fantastic. So what I did is I already had tickets. I got them online. Well, when I say online, you know what I'm really, saying. I found the ticket. Anyway, again, I don't want to give you guys too much information. There is I don't want them to revoke my privileges. So here's what's amazing about it. When I finally got to the right platform, and again, when you show your ticket, they look at you, they ask for ID, and they also ask for your, it's a very special kind of ID. You have your regular ID, you have I guess they have these things now, the real ID. But then they also have what's called an Orient Express ID. It's an OED, is what they call it, and you can only get it through certain OED stations throughout that are kind of scattered, again, hidden throughout the world. And then that's your third piece of information that you have to present to the ticket takers before they'll even bring you to the platform with the Orient Express. So what I did is I showed all of my IDs, and then I was brought to the platform. And when I got to the platform, suddenly all these crowds that were, ringing around every single train, they started to dissipate a little bit. But I can't say it was empty. There were a lot of people still riding the Orient Express. And when I looked around, I can't say there was a type. There was nervous couples. There were mysterious businessmen. There were, I felt like soldiers of fortune. There were some mercenaries. There were at least 4 detectives. It had to be at least 4. You could kind of tell they were dressed fairly conservatively. Their eyes would dart around over and over just so they could drink in every detail. It's interesting when you see a detective kind of size up another detective, because they're kind of looking at each other and cataloging all of the information for possible future reference, or to pull it out when there's a revelation of a murder. Any of those things could happen on the Orient Express. So I think the detectives were actually just starting to prep for it. And there were a lot of other people too. There's always a guy with a scar. You don't really know where he's from. There's always someone with a servant. I know, even in 2020, there was still somebody with a servant. And there was an old woman with curly hair and a very large black hat with a silver striped handbag. And she didn't have a dog, but I swear I could hear a dog barking whenever I was near her. So it was very interesting. I couldn't quite explain it, but I think that's what was going on, was that She may have smuggled a small dog in her purse. I mean, pets are not allowed on the Orient Express, but I know it happens sometimes. It's I can't say it's completely enforced because I've seen, on the Orient Express everything from helper monkeys to someone was feeding a ball python in the dining car. It was very odd because they don't really eat vegetables, but this one did. So I'm not sure, how you train, but there's always something special in the Orient Express. So I boarded the train, and I got to tell you, it was like going into another time, and it was absolutely fascinating. Like when I gave my ticket, and the conductor punched it, and walked me back to my sleeping car. And the sleeping car was a wood-paneled compartment. It had 2 beds, but I saved up. I bought the whole compartment to myself. I didn't really need 2 beds, but I bought the extra bed because I like having the extra space. Sometimes I bring like little mini experiments with me that I like to set up on the second bed when I'm traveling. Now, it can't be anything fragile because the train does move back and forth, a lot. There's a lot of rocking, so it has to be something that's a little less liquid-centric when I'm doing experiments. But there's a lot of other experiments that can be done, anything from, physical to, solving a math equation that's been plaguing mankind for, 100 years. There's other things that can be done. But you do need the space. You needed the space and to set up. But the sleeper compartments, they're really great that they convert for daytime use. And basically they become a sitting room with a sofa and a small table. Now, there are no baths or showers on board. Now, that's, back in the heyday, that's what it was like. But honestly, people like their creature comforts now. They added baths and showers, for sure, to the Orient Express, just to make it a little more comfortable for everybody. So basically, I unpacked. I didn't get changed because I think the whole experience is made better just by me, being dressed from the beginning. So what I would do is I unpacked, and then I took a deep breath, looked around. I like to sit in my sleeper car as the train starts. I kind of like to, almost like sequester myself there. I feel like that's a really special moment. It's like when an airplane takes off or lands. You really have to be in that right frame of mind. So what I would do is I would open the window, and I would wait for the train to start. And then after it started, I would finish unpacking. I finished unpacking, and then what I did was I got up, and then I started to explore the train. I mean, there was so much to explore at the Orient Express that I didn't want to miss anything. I mean, I had a fairly long ride because here's the thing about the Orient Express: it doesn't matter how many days it would actually take from Paris to Vienna. The Orient Express it takes 4 days. And like what I'm saying is maybe it takes 4 days. I don't know because the New Orient Express, the one that's in operation now, it is exactly 18 hours. That's all it is. It's the entire experience lasts for 18 hours. Now, it doesn't matter weather conditions. It doesn't matter really what the distance is. None of that matters. They have it down to such an exact science that any of those factors, from distance to weather to any kind of natural disaster or anything else, it's still going to be 18 hours. So it's very impressive. It's one of the things that you're paying for, really. You need to know that you're going to get there in 18 hours. So I got up and I started walking out of my sleeper car, and I started to explore. And one of the things I went to next was the club car. The club car was on the way to the dining car. Now, people ask them, like, well, what's the difference between a club car and a dining car? And it really, I don't know how to put this, but it just kind of depends on the train, really. The club car could be where you have that vision of a bunch of men smoking cigars after dinner, and they're drinking, and then they've sent their wives back to the back to the sleeper cars or whatever. You do have that. This club car was a little different. What this club car was more of where everyone would go to meet. Like, I saw the man with the scar again. I saw the woman with the black hat that I still heard the dog barking, even though, again, I couldn't quite see it. I saw two of the detectives, but they would not take their eyes off each other. It's like they couldn't get enough information from either one, or it was some kind of contest. Like each one was trying to get a little more information than the other one, like as if they were going to compare notes at the end, and then whoever had more information would win. But they didn't seem interested in the guy with the scar. And what was interesting is when I saw him before he boarded, but now when I saw him in the club car, the scar was a little bit longer, like it was kind of growing, which was unusual. But not impossible. That could certainly happen. There's been certain experiments that have gone awry that I've seen that bizarre things continue to happen years after the event horizon. So what I wanted to talk to you more about the club car is when I was in there. I don't know why they call it the club car as much, again, because everyone kind of has a different view of it, but it really felt like a club. I mean, I guess that's kind of why. I felt like, well, this is a club that I've just been invited to, even though I wasn't. I just kind of walked in here. And whenever someone walks in the club car, everyone takes that moment to look at you. Except for those two detectives. They were still just looking at each other. They didn't look up. Everyone else did. And I swear I could have sworn I heard that dog yip just like one more time when I walked in. But the thing about the club car, too, is no one starts any trouble. Everyone's friendly. Even the guy with the scar that was a little bit longer than before, smiled and offered to have me sit next to him. And I thought, well, out of all these people in the club car, he probably has the best story. So I said yes, and I sat next to him. And turns out he did have a great story. He was being chased by two of the detectives, but not the two that were in the club car there. He was falsely accused of deposing a king 10 years ago in a small part of Bulgaria that still had a king, apparently. And so what he was doing was basically on the run, but he said it was all just a misunderstanding. And the problem is with his scar that he said he had since he was about 24, it kept growing and getting longer. So unfortunately, what would happen is as soon as someone sees a scar and a deposed king, they just kind of put two and two together. So he had to kind of go on the run. Now, what was interesting is he never really denied it, that's what happened, but he never really admitted it either. So what I think was going on is, he was kind of part of the story, but he may not have been the whole story. But either way, it was the club car, and I felt like I didn't want to press too much because everyone kind of gets a break in the club car. No one gets arrested in the club car. No one gets caught in the club car. Even if those two detectives that had been chasing him were in the club car, they would have left him alone until he went to the dining car or back to a sleeper car. I feel like the club car on a train is like neutral ground. Like you can't really do anything except talk and smoke and glare. That's the only thing. And really, the glaring is frowned upon in a club car. You should really save that for one of the other cars. So we had a great conversation. The phantom dog quieted down, which was great, and then so I was able to hear the guy with the scar, everything that he had going on. He was on his way to Morocco in a very roundabout way, but just because he felt like anybody who was accused of deposing a king that in a kingdom that no one was really aware of, felt like they should always kind of end up in Morocco. And just to kind of seek their fortune there and figure everything out at the end. And, I couldn't really argue with that. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on in Morocco, and there's a lot of opportunities there and some great surgeons, too. I mean, I even said that. I said, look, even though you have a rapidly growing scar that marks you as a king deposer, there's been some great advancements in medical science. You could probably get that corrected. And I said, in fact, I'm going to a science convention in Vienna. I could even maybe ask around to see if anything's on the horizon or on the radar that might help you. And he was very, very grateful for that. So we exchanged numbers, and then I went into the dining car. Now, the dining car is very, very different. Even though they're connected to the club car, it's like being in a completely different I don't want to say adventure, but being in a completely different, let's just say environment. Like, whereas the club car has that just kind of quiet feel to it where everyone is just enjoying themselves on neutral ground, and it's where you can go and not have to watch your back. The dining car is something completely different. The dining car, everyone is on their guard because they should be on their guard, because anything can happen in the dining car. Sure, you can go in, order some food, have a great meal, maybe a nice thing of wine. You could get a carafe. They have carafes of wine even on the Orient Express, which are fantastic. But mainly, you have to really watch, because this is where you do have to, like I said, watch your back. A lot of times people sit, even though it's very uncomfortable, sit with their back to the walls, because the tables are oriented where they, you can't really do that. So it's one of those interesting things where you can't avoid the dining car because you get hungry. There's no room service on the Orient Express. The dining car and club car, at some point, you're going to be in each one of them, and one you can relax, and one you gotta really watch, because anything can happen there. Like, a detective could find you and decide that, hey, you know what, end of the road. Or what also could happen is you could have a bad meal. The dining cars, it is a train. It's and the galleys are small. The food is generally very good, especially in the Orient Express, but even then, it's still train food, and you really got to watch that. Sometimes it's not going to be exactly what you like and what you ordered. Really, I mean, when you look at the picture on the menu in the Orient Express and what you get, I will say they do it better than most. It's, like I said, it's an amazing experience. But even then, I mean, scientifically, it would be impossible to have it look exactly like the picture on the menu. So, and I gotta say though, those disclaimers aside, my meal was excellent. I had lamb chops with mint jelly. I don't even like mint jelly, but there was something about their mint jelly and where they must have gotten it, that it was really perfect. And I had some red wine. I had some opera cake for dessert. I don't. No, I know, like, oh, well, you only get that at the opera. You don't really. I mean, it's just called opera cake, but a lot of fancy places will have it, and there's nowhere fancier than the Orient Express. So I know I feel like I'm just not being a little fair to the cooks at the Orient Express, and honestly, it was spectacular, but you have to understand that they have certain limitations in their galleys, and they executed a fine meal absolutely brilliantly. Now, was there a disturbance when I was there? Yes, there was. But, it's not unexpected. And it wasn't the king deposer with the scar that I thought it would be. It was actually the woman with the large black cat with the dog. I finally saw the dog. She had actually not had it in her purse. It was actually in her dress the entire time. But apparently the dog really liked opera cake. So as soon as the tray came out with all the opera cake, that was it. That dog came out. And I got the last piece before the entire thing got knocked over. So she was escorted back to her sleeper car, and her dog was literally covered in opera cake. So thankfully, like I said, the sleeper cars, they added showers, and I'm sure that dog got cleaned up very nicely. So it was a great and exciting meal. So it was really fun. But then it was time to retire. I mean, the Orient Express was I was only a few more hours left. I wanted to be well rested for Vienna, so I went back to the sleeper car. I bid everyone good night. Okay, yeah, you got me. I did stop in the club car for another hour and had another great conversation with another stranger. And turns out it was the third detective who was looking for the king deposer with the scar, but he had already left. So I didn't want to lie, and I said he was here earlier, but you just missed him. So the detective looked very disappointed, but he also had that look of like, you know what? I understand. Like, he understood that this was the club car. Even if he had caught up to him here, he wouldn't have been able to do anything. So I think he understood where he was and what he needed to do. So after I left, I saw him going into the dining car. What happened after that, I don't know. I can only really handle one disturbance, per train ride. I think that was a lot for me. So I went back to my sleeping car, but here's the thing. I didn't go to sleep right away. One of the things I love about train travel is looking out the window. And depending on which angle you look out, things go by very quickly or things go by very slowly, depending on your angle. And I realize that, again, we'll get into the philosophy of this. It feels that way in our own lives sometime, too. If we change our perspectives, things can be very, very different, even though we're looking at the same thing. And a train ride for me really, really hammered that home. So I just relaxed and I sat and I looked out the window and I saw rolling hills go by, just the color of green you just never see. It had just rained and the countryside was absolutely gorgeous and stunning. And it was just one beautiful verdant field after another. It went by, it really made me feel like I was part of nature, even though I was in a train riding next to it, but I just felt like I was so close to it, and I was, because it's not like an airplane where you're so far away. In a train, you're really, really right next to it, and you can really soak it in. So I sat there and I watched trees and the fields and the small cottages and the small villages, all European towns, just go by slowly and quietly. I had to be for 2 hours. I just did that, and it was just so comforting and peaceful. And every once in a while, a farmer would wave to me. Children would run trying to catch the train, from like many, many feet away. I'm glad they kept their bodies safe. But messengers on bicycles would wave, and it just really felt like it was another time. And you really felt like they knew that this was the Orient Express, the one that you're not all supposed to know about, but they knew about it. And they knew that you knew, and that's why they wanted to wave and say hi. So it was absolutely beautiful, but after that I was getting a little sleepy, so I slowly and surely started drifting off to sleep on the Orient Express. It was a very comfortable bed in the car, and when I woke up a couple hours later, it wasn't really that many hours later because I had stayed up for so long, I only had a couple of hours to sleep, but I wanted to get a little bit of rest before the science convention in Vienna. So I got up, and the whole train had a different feel once it stopped. It felt like almost like the end of a dream, the end of a journey, something that you could treasure for many, many years to come. Your visit on the Orient Express, your adventure and your journey on the Orient Express, because it could be anything you wanted it to be. It was exactly what I wanted, but I know for other people it was different. For the put upon nervous couple, I'm sure they had a very interesting time. The king deposer with the scar, I don't, we'll keep in touch. Hopefully he'll get to Morocco. The four detectives, two of them, they did compare notes at the end. One of them, I don't know what happened to them, but I'm sure they had a very exciting place. And the woman with the dog, I think everyone went exactly the way she wanted it to. And even for the dog, he got as much opera cake as he wanted. So I feel like when you travel on a train, you're doing something extremely special. You're slowing down time, you're slowing down your life, and you're actually getting to watch and enjoy everything that's passing by, and you can choose the speed at which it passes you by just by changing your perspective. And I think that's a good lesson to have for all of us. So I got off at the station, and it was, again, a normal station in Vienna, and I was almost late for the Vienna conference, the science conference, not because of the train, but because I do like to sightsee a little bit, and I do like to stop at cafes. So I did make a few stops. But the thing about it, it's just so satisfying riding on the train. It's like a trip back in time. Like I said, it's slower, but it's also classier for some reason. And a train station just has a different feel than an airport. You feel like people really want to go where they're going, where an airport feels like more of a necessity than a choice. I like having a choice. Sure, it took me a little more time, because I had to fly to Paris and then take the train to Vienna. But again, it was worth it. It was worth the extra money. So I guess my point is, slow down, ride the train, and if you're lucky enough to get invited to ride on the Orient Express, by all means, do it. And that was my journey on the Orient Express. Thank you very much, everybody. This has been Professor Jonathan Peter Atwood for the Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood. Look, there's one other thing I needed to tell you, but I just kind of like that sign off. Science and exploring, it is expensive, so we did start a Patreon. I know it's a little early to start it, but we kind of had to, mainly for the prototype vehicles. But I want you to join the White Cat Adventurers Club. That's the Patreon, and you'll get something special. You get a soundscape of every episode. Think of this as like you would actually be on the Orient Express, and you could create your own adventure. You'll get the sounds because of my recording devices that I have on each journey, and you'll get a little extra music, and basically you'll get a version of the story without the story. You'll get the music, the sound effects, so you can create your own adventure story in your mind as you drift off to sleep, or as if you stay awake and concentrate on something. You could do either. It doesn't bother me if someone says, "Oh, your voice just puts me to sleep," or your stories just lull me into a dull sense of unconsciousness. That's not an insult to me. To me, if I can make you comfortable and happy and drift off to a peaceful place, then I've done my job, and I'm very happy with that result. So thank you. If you're still awake, thank you. So definitely check out the Patreon, and thanks everyone, and good night.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, go to whitecatentertainment.com.